right, we're going to call a meeting to order. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Safety and Government Operations Committee meeting. I'd like to first take a moment of silence to acknowledge the death of someone very important to the work around public safety here in our city. It's Dante Barksdale. It's a very, very tough time for folks that were close to him. I did not know him personally, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge him in this meeting, given the work that we do here. Thank you. So in attendance today, I want to acknowledge the members of the committee. So first we have myself, Chair Mark Conway. We have Councilman Christopher Burnett, Councilman Z. Cohen, Chair Eric Costello, Councilman Antonio Glover, Councilwoman Felicia Porter, and Councilwoman Odette Ramos. Also want to acknowledge Councilman Schleifer, who is on the call as well, not a part of the committee, but attending on this call. I want to also acknowledge Councilman Dorsey, who is on the call as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other council members not on the committee that are part of this call? Please feel free to speak up. Hearing none, I'll move on. I also want to acknowledge members of the Office of the President, Nikki Thompson and Matt Stegman, who are on the call. Representing the Mayor's Office, I'm going to acknowledge Nia Themelis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So this afternoon, we will have a hearing for Bill 21-0014. Baltimore City Fire Department reporting requirements for the purpose of requiring the fire chief and the Baltimore City Fire Department to report annually certain information to the mayor and city council of Baltimore, requiring that the report be made available on the department's website and providing for a special effective date. At the request of the fire department, we'll be hearing this bill first out of the original order for the meeting. This bill was introduced on January 11th, 2021. And the bill was sponsored by Councilmember Chris Burnett. I'm going to open the floor to comments from the sponsor. Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. In your inboxes is the 2020 Labor Committee's comprehensive equity report on the Baltimore City Fire Department's hiring and promotions within the department. And, want to give you ample time to review. My apologies for not getting that out earlier, but we'll jump in later. But essentially, this will be the first of a few hearings, so there'll be time. But essentially what this bill sets out to do is, one, provide a more transparent overview over the department staffing of fire suppression, EMS. We want to look at disparities and gaps related to supervisions, promotions, by race and gender. That report really shows that there are some disparities in these areas as it relates to the promotion, the hiring practices, and the distribution by race and gender across battalions. Want to be clear that this is in no way an attempt to attack the fire department in any way. I really do appreciate all of the amazing work that our first responders do at the Baltimore City Fire Department, but we can always get better. And when we think about creating pathways for our young people in the city of Baltimore, the fire department can be an excellent career choice. And we want to make sure that in a majority Black city that everybody gets a fair shake to rise to the top, to rise through the ranks. And I think the first step in that is being a lot more transparent about what's occurring in the department and pushing the department to develop new recruiting strategies, new promotion strategies that use an equity lens and ensure that regardless of your race or gender, the best and the brightest are the ones that are leading this department forward in saving lives in the city of Baltimore. So with that, I'll hand it back over, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you, Councilman Burnett. Now for agency reports, the committee will now hear from agency representatives. I want to start off with the Law Department. Do we have a representative from the Law Department?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair. This is Hilary Ruley from the city's Law Department. We stand by our report and approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency. As long as it doesn't identify individuals by name, there's no issue with the data reporting or collection.
Thank you, Hilary. Next, we'll hear from the Department of Finance. Anyone from the Department of Finance?
Yes, this is Bob Cenname, Budget Director representing the Department of Finance. We stand by our report. We have no objection to the bill.
Thank you, Bob. And finally, we have the Fire Department. We have Chief Ford on the line.
Yes, I am.
Do you have comments or reports?
Yes, we were hoping we'd have a longer conversation about parts of it. There's certainly parts of this bill we've already started moving forward with, and in fact, it's our intention to, as when parts of this bill was discussed early on, it's our intention to put out an annual report that captures basically all the data that was requested in the first portion of this bill. But we were hoping we'd have a conversation about other components of the bill.
Thank you, Chief Ford. So I understand the sponsor and the Fire Department have some additional things they want to discuss, portions of this bill before we move forward. So we're going to go to recess on this hearing for that, for a work session to be announced in the near future. To that end, we'll move on to the next bill. Bill 21-0017. It's a study and report, city employee parking benefits, for the purpose of requiring that the Department of Human Resources and the Department of Finance submit a report to the mayor and city council evaluating certain matters relating to providing parking and commuter benefits to city employees and providing for a special effective date. This bill was introduced on January 11th, 2021. The bill was sponsored by Councilmember Ryan Dorsey. And I'm going to open up the floor to Councilman Ryan Dorsey, the sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill, as the title suggests, is merely a requirement for a study to take place and a report to be provided as an outcome of that study. The basis of this is the fact that about 5% of the city's employees receive a fully paid parking benefit. This is that city agencies and offices like yours and mine, Mr. Chair, from our annual budget, from our monthly budgets, appropriate or transfer funds over to the Parking Authority of Baltimore to have our parking spaces and our staff's parking spaces paid for. And there are a couple of concerns I have over this practice. One is that we are effectively paying for people to drive their single occupant vehicles. It is 2021. I hope that everybody here believes that climate change is real and that we understand that the single largest contributor of carbon emissions in Baltimore City is single occupant vehicles and combustion engines, and that it should throw up a red flag for all of us that we are literally paying for people to drive their cars. We're subsidizing people becoming polluters. And at the same time, I don't know anybody that doesn't think at least from time to time in their experience, that congestion is a problem, that traffic sucks, and we're literally paying for people. Hey, Quentin.
Thank you.
Hello, sir.
We are literally paying for people to be congestion. Like when you get into traffic, you're not getting into traffic, you are traffic. And we are literally paying for people to be that traffic. And at the same time that we are spending upwards of $750,000 in taxpayer funds each year to provide this particular form of transportation benefit to just 5% of the city's employees, while providing no benefit whatsoever to the other 95%. Even for those 5%, we provide no comparable alternative, even though the IRS tax code makes it a pre-taxable pre-tax fringe benefit, just like this paid parking is. And that for those employees who might be eligible, but who do not own a car, say the lowest paid people in a city council office. I know that there has been over the last term at least one city and at least one or two city council staffers who were at the lowest end of the city council pay spectrum and did not own a car for financial reasons, and yet we would not provide for their bus pass or any alternative transportation benefit at the same time as we were paying for their parking. The last point that I'll make is that when we talk about those who might be eligible, that's all we can talk about because we don't know who's eligible. There is no written policy whatsoever laying out any criteria for eligibility. And so what this bill does is ask that all of these concerns that I raised be studied and reported on, including proposing eligibility criteria policy. And I think that we have the brain trust in the city, and I think that we have the goodwill within our city agencies to study this matter in earnest and turn around a really good report. And I'm really glad that we'll take up this issue here with the support of this committee and the council to say studying how we can do things differently and better is what we're here for, to learn and be able to then make better policy decisions and advocate for better policy decisions in a more informed manner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey. I'm going to open up the floor to the committee. Will now hear from agency representatives. First, we've got the Department of Human Resources. We have a representative from Human Resources.
Hi, that's me, Kimberly Humphrey. How's everyone? Hello, Chairman.
Kimberly.
So we've submitted our statement and we stand by the statement that we submitted. We don't have any other comments.
Thank you, Kimberly.
And I'm sorry, that was in, we did not oppose the report. We'll be working on that.
Thank you. Next, we've got the Department of Finance.
Hi, this is Bob Cenname, Budget Director, representing the Department of Finance. We're in support of the bill. We did have one amendment that we wanted to offer. We believe that parking authority should be part of this study group. The reason for that is that in our experience, the parking authority with managing garages in and around the downtown area helps us get a better understanding of what the market dynamics are for some of these arrangements. And of course, we'll be looking at this with an eye towards, what the cost is or if there are potential savings. So we think adding them to the group officially would be a good step. But we are in support of the bill and have talked to the sponsor about it.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we'll open up to questions from the committee. Are there any questions from folks on the committee?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thanks. Thanks, Councilman Dorsey, for bringing this to us. And it's certainly something that, to be thinking about. You had mentioned low income in particular, but I don't see anything in the bill that would say that we'd have to look at things by income. Because it seems to me like the goal of what we're trying to do is to allow for alternative modes of transportation for everybody. And so I just wanted to clarify that, right? That we want to make sure that there could be, people could be eligible for bus pass or cash payment as you have in the bill, and it doesn't have to be income based. Is that right?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Yeah, the bill does ask that the study group look into any possibility and report on the fiscal impact of entering into seeking some sort of support with MTA, possibly to be able to offer discounted passes or things like that. Whatever alternatives might be available that we could potentially be considering to offer to the other 95%. But the root of this bill, I should just be really clear. The impetus for this bill is a policy referred to as parking cash out that has been around for more than a decade. There's a statewide law on parking cash out in California that's been around for more than a decade that basically says that if you're an employer and you are willing to incur a cost to pay for any of your employees to park, you should at the very least offer them an option to take the cash value of that cost instead, in order for you to be able to choose to travel through more sustainable means, whether that's public transit or using that money to maintain a bike or have adequate walking shoes or all-weather clothing that you might need in order to bike or walk or stand at a bus stop in order to get to and from work. That these are just as valuable and important and utilized transportation options as driving single occupant vehicles. And that if we did that as a bare minimum, then we would at least get a certain number of the people who are right now being incentivized to drive their single occupant vehicles to consider switching their modes of transportation.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up?
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thanks, Councilman. So it seems like there's two goals here. One is to make sure that the same type of benefit that's given to people who drive their cars can also be given to people who ride the bus, which is the majority of our city employees, correct? And then the second piece is just to see if we can change habit, but it's not income based. So I just want to be clear that that's not income based. It's just the fact of those two sets of employees is who we're trying to address here with this particular bill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? I've got Councilman Schleifer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure it's working with my camera and that you guys can hear me at the same time. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just had a question. Is there, maybe somebody could speak to it when these programs are set up? Is there a component to it to ensure that people are actually not just taking the money and finding a more affordable, place to park, for instance? I know that certainly it's parking is an incentive that a lot of companies utilize to get people to park close to the building that they're working in so that they're on time and that increases efficiency. I guess my question here is if we were to pay somebody out, let's say the parking lot next to City Hall costs $150 a month and they have a spot there right next to the building. If they took that $150, they can find a spot, 10 blocks away that would cost $50 a month and then pocket the other $100 a month. So is there some controls in place to ensure that people are actually utilizing these other forms of transportation and not simply taking the benefit and working out a roundabout way? So I was just wondering if that's done elsewhere and if that's something that's taken into consideration here.
No.
No to which one?
All of the above.
So it's not taken into
Look,
consideration.
I think that it's mostly a market-based, it's mostly a reality cost-based thing. I mean, the parking authority is a competitor in a competitive marketplace. And so the likelihood of somebody finding a cheaper alternative, particularly because the parking authority discounts their rates for city employees, it's pretty slim to none that they're going to find a better option. If frankly, if we're talking, one of the options that I figure is if it costs you $100, if you're cash out, for example, if we're even talking, if a cash out policy were to come to fruition, and your cash out value is $100 a month, then somebody might use $7 of that 3 or 4 times throughout the month and be paying $21 or $28 for a day's parking on 3 or 4 different occasions. And they'd still have $72 in the bank that, if that's just money in their pocket because they're, walking to work, whatever it is, if we're willing to incur the cost to provide them any benefit at all, then I think it's reasonable that we should not necessarily control exactly how that benefit is utilized by them. Just the same way as we provide people options who their healthcare insurance company is. We don't just say you only have Care First. The city of Baltimore says you could have Care First, you could have Kaiser Permanente, you could have Aetna. They're all options available to you.
I agree, Councilman, and so that's exactly to my point. So I would just suggest that as it proceeds, that it be worked out just the way you explained with health insurance, that it does become an option offering. So if somebody has a different means of transportation, whether it's the subway, the light rail, a bus pass, whatever it may be, that they be given options to choose. I do like the proposal to give them options. I would just be cautious that if you give people a straight cash out and let them rework it, the benefit to the city on efficiency could easily be lost by an employee who says, I'll take the cash out of $100 a month, look for street parking, and every 4 hours have to run outside and feed the meter, and then therefore decreasing efficiency. Thank you. I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Give me 1 second. Thank you. I want to finally open up one more time to questions from the committee or any other council members in the meeting. Hearing none, I'll move on to public testimony. The committee will now take public testimony. If there are questions from folks in the meeting, please raise your hand. Yep. So with public testimony, here's some ground rules. Committee staff will coordinate the public testimony, so please be patient. If you are connecting online, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to testify. Each speaker must state their name prior to speaking. Users who call in cannot be identified by name and will be unmuted by the host one by one. If you do not wish to testify, please say so when you are unmuted. Attendees will hear 2 beeps when they're unmuted. Please state your name at the beginning of the testimony. And if a speaker is inaudible, they will be directed to call back or provide their testimony in the chat function. With that, I will open up the floor to public testimony. Okay, so we are unmuting someone, and if you hear a beep, that is an invitation to testify. So please speak up. Hearing none, we'll move forward to the next section. Are there any amendments to the bill? So the Department of Finance recommended adding the parking authority under the agencies to provide a report. Is there a motion to move that amendment?
So moved.
That was moved by, I missed.
Second.
By Councilmember Cohen, second by Councilmember Ramos.
So moved by Councilmember Cohen and seconded by Councilmember Odette Ramos. Okay, now we're going to call for a vote. Mark Conway, the chair, I vote yay.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think we need to move the amended bill first, correct?
We're voting on the amendment.
We're voting on the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
So we're voting on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the bill if we keep the amendment. So first, my vote is yay. Councilmember Chris Burnett. Yes. Councilmember Zeke Cohen.
Yes.
Councilmember Eric Costello.
Yes.
Councilmember Antonio Glover. Councilmember Antonio Glover, I can't hear you. Can you give a thumbs up or a thumbs down? That's a yes. Council member Felicia Porter is having some issues. She's been booted. I'm going to actually give her a call and come back to her. Council member Odette Ramos.
Yes.
Yes. So we're going to move on because the amendment passes. Okay. So Councilmember Porter is having some technical difficulties and was unfortunately kicked off the meeting. So we're going to move forward to the vote. She'll be absent. Is there a motion to move the bill?
Bill is amended.
We have a motion from Councilmember Ramos and a second from Councilmembers Cohen. Time for a vote. I vote yay. Councilmember Burnett.
Yes.
Councilmember Cohen.
Yes.
Councilmember Costello.
Yes.
Councilmember Glover. Yes, and Councilmember Ramos.
Yes.
Thank you. The bill moves forward and will be announced in the next council meeting. On to Bill 21-0018, a study and report of the towing dispatch system for the purpose of requiring that Baltimore City Information Technology, in consultation with certain other agencies, submit a report to the mayor and city council evaluating methods and systems of dispatching towing vehicles within Baltimore City and providing for a special effective date. This bill was introduced on January 11th, 2021. The bill is sponsored by Councilmember Ryan Dorsey. I'm going to open the floor to comments from Councilmember Dorsey.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate you scheduling both of these bills to be heard today. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Before I forget, at some point, I'd like to ask for a member of the committee to make move an amendment that has not actually been drafted, simply to add the Department of General Services into this bill. It's a suggestion that was made in the Department of Public Works report, and And I believe as a result of the Department of Public Works making that suggestion, that's why the Department of General Services then provided a bill report on this. They are in favor of being a participant in this study group as well. Mr. Chair, this bill studies the way that the city has, the city dispatches tow trucks, primarily for to police scenes. This could be where there are crashes. This is where there could be vehicles, say, that have been abandoned by, criminals that are running away from the scene of a stolen car or something like that. There are a variety of different circumstances under which a police officer arrives at a scene and needs to have a vehicle towed from the public right-of-way, where if it were left there, it would be obstructing the movement of traffic or the public right-of-way in some other way. The way that this is done presently is that the city has a handful of contractors. It's really a very small number of contractors who do this, who are assigned a radius around their company's office. And anytime the police respond to a crash within a particular company's zone, the police officer calls back to the city dispatch unit, and dispatch looks up whose radius they are in and then calls that company, who then sends somebody out because it's in their zone. This is the way it's been done for the last 50 years. And so far as I can tell, the fact that it's been done this way for the last 50 years is the only reason why we are still doing it this way. It is 2021. We have to explore other options. Technology can be our friend here. The city of Baltimore has already, for some time, been tracking the real-time vehicle location of many of the vehicles in its own fleet, in the fire department, in the Department of Public Works, and based on my conversation earlier with the director of the Department of General Services, far more than I was actually aware of previously are being tracked through real-time vehicle location. What this bill does is require that a work group of a number of city agencies come together and look at whether it's possible to dispatch tow trucks on the same basis. One of the reasons, or a couple of the reasons why this is, I think, important and useful. One is that we have a lot of people in the city who can perform this kind of work. There are many, many different towing companies of a variety of different sizes in the city, but not all of them may be big enough to meet the eligibility criteria set in the city's contract provisions when hiring these towers. And I believe that changing the manner of dispatch may allow us to reevaluate the provisions and the stipulations in the contract and open it up to smaller companies so that we're not so exclusively relying on only the largest companies in the city. There are many, many people who, and many of whom are small minority-owned businesses who would like to get more involved in providing work as a contractor to the city. Of note, one of the things I think is important that this bill could possibly open up also is more of that minority business, where right now many of these small Black-owned businesses are operating only as subcontractors to larger white-owned businesses, meaning that they're being paid less and getting a smaller portion of the work. And if we change the manner of dispatch in a way that opens up more opportunity for them to become primary contractors, we can help to grow those small Black-owned businesses in Baltimore City in a way that the current system just does not allow for. So I really look forward to any questions that the committee has. Again, The bill calls for a number of different agencies to be a part of this work group, and I would ask that that somebody on the committee make a motion at some point to include the Department of General Services into this work group. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey. Now we'll move on to agency reports. We'll hear from agency representatives, starting with the Department of Transportation. Do we have a representative from the Department of Transportation?
Hello, everybody. This is Liam Davis. I'm turning my video on. Okay, everybody can see me. We stand by our bill report, which is no objection. DOT pretty much is an advisory role. Yeah, as and we're prepared to advise if needed.
I'm sorry, Liam, we lost your audio for a moment.
Geez. Just for, we stand by our bill report, no objection.
Thank you, Liam. Next, we've got the Department of Finance.
Hi, this is Bob Cenname, Budget Director, representing Department of Finance. We stand by our report, no objection to this bill.
Thank you, Director Cenname. Next, we've got the Baltimore City Information Technology.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Todd Carter from BSIT, and we've reviewed this legislation, and we have no objections to the bill.
Thank you, Todd. Next, we've got the Police Department.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michelle Wurtzberger. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Baltimore Police Department. We stand by our report, which basically said that we had no objections either.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we've got the Fire Department.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Executive Assistant Chief Roman Clark. We stand by our report as written, and we have no objections to the bill as it is written.
And finally, we have the Department of Public Works.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize to the committee. My system was not recognizing my mic or my camera. This is Marcia Collins representing the Department of Public Works. We reviewed the bill, and I want to thank Councilman Dorsey for that excellent summary of our bill response. We have no objection to the passage of the bill. We don't expect this to be an onerous task on the part of us or some of the other collaborating agencies. And we would be happy to answer any questions should the committee have any.
Thank you, Marcia. Next week, we're going to open up to questions from committee members. Questions from the committee members?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Yes, hi. Thanks again, Councilman Dorsey, for bringing this bill to us. Is it a procurement issue or is it a preference issue? I mean, it sounds to me, because sometimes we do have contracts with various vendors that we just always go to for various things, whether it's like, the Parks Department goes to certain, vendors that they've already vetted, and there's, that's sort of a larger procurement issue. And then there's just, whether the police department is just using this particular vendor just because it's convenient. And so I'm curious about that as we go into thinking about the study of their bill.
Thanks. That's a good question. In this case, this manner of dispatch is kind of intertwined with the procurement stipulations that the contracts that are used to hire these towing companies stipulate that they be able to respond 24/7, and in order to do so, basically they have to evidence that they have a certain size fleet and number of tow truck drivers in order to present to the city the legitimate claim that they will be able to respond when called 24/7. And so there being so few companies who have that size, the size and capacity that that 24/7 response requires, it significantly narrows the pool of interested or eligible applicants or contractors. And so once you get it down to those people, it's really just a matter of having to assign to those companies on some basis. For example, what this results in is there being one company, rather 3 companies, that are owned by the same person that make up the entire east side of the city. Those companies have been able to grow through central ownership over a long time, and that has helped them significantly. And there's literally only one company that gets a call from the police department east of Charles Street, and that's simply a matter of there only being this one company or these 3 companies owned by one person who have the capacity on that side of the city. There are several companies on the west side, 3, maybe 4, but I think it's only 3 at this point, who each have their own territory. But even then, there are still gaps where it's not in anybody's territory. And then the department kind of has to go ad hoc on the basis of a call and say, hey, this is just a little bit outside of your territory, to the south or to the west or to the north. Can you get it? So the current system doesn't even account for all of the land mass of the city. But that's what we are bound to because we expect 24/7 response from any and all companies. Changing to a real-time vehicle location basis for dispatch, where, for example, as a possibility, and one that that needs to be explored, on a basis where a person might only have 1 tow truck or two tow trucks, they might not be able to perform towing 24/7, but when they're on the clock, they can be a resource that we can go to if they happen to be the nearest vehicle, nearest tow truck to where the need is. But we can't get there if we don't change the manner of dispatch to be able to go to them. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I guess I imagine that some of the work coming out of this committee could actually have some meaning to when we think about procurement reform in the rest of the city. And so that's why that was the preface to my question. So thanks, that absolutely answers it. Thanks.
You're welcome, thank you.
Councilman Dorsey, I have a question as well. With regard to minority-owned businesses and smaller businesses that are unable to get these contracts, is this a matter of how we dispatch or a matter of the threshold to be considered a medallion company? Is there any clarity on that?
It's that the two are integrally intertwined. That a medallion is just you being deemed capable of meeting the contract requirements of being able to respond 24/7 and to be able to do so because you have a fleet of a certain size. That is what it means to have them, and I should say, and to be able to meet certain public safety criteria from the police department based on the fact that you are going to be a part of the chain of evidence in, if you have to get called in order to tow a stolen vehicle, you become a part of the chain of evidence that just handles that. And so the police department does set certain other criteria based on integrity of the company, integrity of personnel, and things of the like. But it's really that threshold for company size becomes a bar to many of the smaller companies in the city. And then unless we consider the possibility of narrowing our manner of dispatch down to a one call, one truck potential like Uber or Lyft does in 2021 all day, every day, then, unless we narrow it down to that, we are off the bat excluding many, all of the city's smallest companies. And one of the things, I don't know if it's explicitly called for in the bill text, but one of the things I've discussed throughout this the process, and I should say, I've had good partnership with the police department, the fire department, BCIT in preparing for this. That it should definitely be a part of this exploratory process to say what we have to do to write into those contracts that there is some overnight or holiday pay differential, right? There comes this question of, if you don't require everybody who's towing to be able to respond 24/7, how will you ensure that anybody will be available to respond to your call at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning? All of that can be factored into and needs to be factored into the reporting, the study and the reporting that this bill will require.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey. Are there any other questions from council members on the committee?
Mr. Chair, I have a question, and I should have asked it in the last bill too, but it doesn't look like there's any members of the city council that are on this, the working groups on both bills. Wouldn't that be important to have one of us on there?
Councilwoman, I didn't call for any council members to be a part of this, just because I believe in the intelligence of the city agencies and the staff there to do this work. I think that they understand it, and that it's really an information gathering process. And frankly, look, as the sponsor of these bills, I've been the most dedicated person to these subjects. I don't necessarily want to write a bill where I kind of assume that I should be the person that's chosen to be on this group. But for example, look, I have another bill that that this committee is going to hear in a couple of weeks that addresses the issue of nuisance parking. And on that bill, I called for a variety of city agencies, DOT, housing, the police department, as well as 2 members of the city council, and said that the mayor should choose one of those 2 members to be the chair of the committee. We have 2 members chosen by the council president, but one of them selected as the chair of the work group by the mayor. So, I just don't know that it's always necessary for a council member to be in the mix, and that's why I didn't. I've had good conversation. I have faith in the city agencies to turn out some good information here on their own.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from folks on the committee? Any questions from council members in the meeting? Okay, I'm going to open up to public testimony. Are there any questions from the public? Please feel free to raise your hand in the no questions. We'll move on to amendments. Are there any amendments we'd like to consider?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer an amendment.
Councilman, go ahead.
On line 10, after Department of Transportation, I'd like to insert Department of General Services.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen. Is there a motion to move this amendment?
I move the amendment.
So moved and seconded.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Sorry. I have a question. In general, we'd be having written amendments in front of us. Is that right? But I mean, given the small amendment here, I don't think it's a big deal. But in general, would that be the case?
In general, yes. But in this case, I think this is a small enough change that we can make a quick change here. And we've received the General Services report. I think everyone should have received that in their inboxes as well for consideration. Moving forward, we have it moved by Councilman Cohen and seconded by Councilman Burnett. We'll move on to the vote. Myself, I vote yay. Councilman Burnett?
Yes.
Councilman Cohen?
Yes.
Councilman Costello?
Yes.
Councilman Glover? That's a yes. Councilwoman Porter is having technical difficulties. Councilwoman Ramos, excuse me.
Yes.
The amendment moves forward. Any other amendments to the bill? All right. Is there a motion to move the bill favorable with amendments?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Costello and seconded by Councilman Cohen. Is that Councilman Cohen?
I think it was Burnett, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Burnett. Thank you. On to the vote. Myself, I vote yay. Councilman Burnett. That's a yay. Councilman Cohen.
Yes.
Councilman Costello. That's a yes. Councilman Glover. Councilman Glover.
Yes.
That's a yes. Councilman Porter is not here. And Councilwoman Ramos.
Yes.
The bill moves forward. It will be announced in the next council hearing. These hearings are adjourned, and the committee will present these bills to the full council at the next meeting. With that, I'm going to call this meeting to close.